What happens when a passionate liberal confronts the heir of privilege? In a small-town bookstore where ideals clash and tensions rise, Jamie's world is turned upside down when Barron Trump steps into the spotlight. As their words become weapons, can a shared vulnerability shatter preconceived notions and forge an unlikely bond? Dive into a story of rebirth where understanding reshapes beliefs amid societal division. In the heart of a bustling city, where the clamor of voices intertwined with vibrant street art, stood a trendy local store, vibrant with splashes of color and an array of causes fighting for attention. This was The Collective, a haven for those who believed in progressive values, eco-friendly products, and social justice. A large window framed the storefront, decorated with multicolored flags representing various movements. LGBTQ plus equality, climate action, and a strong stance against inequality. Inside, the fragrant aroma of organic coffee wafted through the air, curling around the racks crammed with books on feminism, LGBTQ rights, and anti-racism. The atmosphere buzzed with the energy of idealism, creativity, and community, a sanctuary for impassioned activists and curious newcomers alike. Among the colorful displays of ethically traded goods and local authors' works, worked Jamie, a passionate and outspoken employee, ready to defend their worldviews at a moment's notice. With vibrant purple hair cropped short and an assortment of piercings that twinkled as if echoing the store's ideals, Jamie radiated a sense of confident empathy. They saw themselves as a protector of progressive beliefs, an unwavering advocate for social change, thriving on the discussions stirred by community events hosted by the collective. They carried a pile of pamphlets under one arm, while flipping through a stack of donation request emails on a tablet with the other hand as they prepped for the upcoming community gathering. A local initiative meant to galvanize participation in environmental activism. Can you believe this? The city is finally adopting green waste bins next month, Jamie exclaimed to their colleague Sarah, who was arranging colorful tote bags around a display. It's a major step forward, small but significant. I can't wait to see the turnout for today's event. We've got to spark that enthusiasm, they added, their excitement palpable. Sarah chuckled lightly. As long as people show up and engage. We can't afford another low-attendance event, Jamie. Her long braids danced as she shook her head in mock disapproval, but smiled with warmth towards Jamie's unwavering enthusiasm. Jamie swept a glance around the place, admiring the passionate chaos that characterized the collective. They had found their niche here, an active part of something bigger. A sudden influx of customers caught their eye as sunbeams poured into the space, inviting a summer warmth that enveloped them. In the store buzzed with life, just like they loved it. But outside, drifting along a side street, a quietly curious figure was weaving through the crowd. Barron Trump, a tall and somewhat awkward young man with sandy blonde hair and striking blue eyes, felt a mix of emotions as he made his way to the collective. He had often been overshadowed by the weight of expectations linked to his family name. As he stepped further into the station of chatter and laughter, he couldn't help but notice the contrast around him. The vibrancy of the pausing and the moneyless ideals that seemed to warp alongside his family's staunch conservatism. He had always been drawn to spaces like this, uncomfortable as they might be, because he yearned to understand the perspectives that felt so alien to him. Battling skepticism and intrigue, Barron found himself grappling with awkward yet wonderful moments in a melting pot of ideas. He had always longed to engage without the heavy cloud of predetermination ruling the conversation, a desire that sat heavy in his chest as he crossed the threshold into the inviting chaos of the collective. As Jamie continued to assist customers, help out with arrangements, and chat with fellow patrons, a wave of uneasily curious energy washed over the room. Barron looked at the "Welcome" banner proudly hung above, painted in bright colors that mocked him with their cheerful optimism. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress his anxieties before stepping toward the snack table, where trays of vegan pastries and organic smoothies beckoned in colorful bowls. Despite the laughter surrounding him, Barron felt a familiar weight in the atmosphere, a personal recognition of how people viewed him. At their first meeting in an adjacent cafe, he had felt invisible, only one of many in the public eye. A random passerby during a perfectly ordinary moment earlier. Now here, in a store where ideals collided like tectonic plates. Every step stirred thoughts about judgments surrounding his family, societal assumptions that didn't take into account the depth of individual experiences. As Jamie handed a pamphlet to a wide-eyed customer, their gaze flickered towards Barron. A flicker of recognition sparked an assumption deep within them, jarring their understanding of the young man. Jamie's initial impulse was to assume the worst, drawing a beckoning line between his presence and the values they held dear. "Look, it's Barron Trump," Jamie whispered to Sarah, raising their voice slightly louder than intended, making a performance of it. "Bet he's come in to squeeze the community's values into a soundbite or poll." Troubled laughter echoed from those within earshot, leaving Barron momentarily frozen, a crumbling statue touched by a flood of panic. Barron's vision narrowed as he felt the sharp fray of the world around him grow fainter. Caught off guard by the layered hostility that dripped from Jamie's words, a tightness settled in his chest. "I'm here to learn, not to provoke or judge," he finally mustered, trying to hold on to a sense of dignity. Silence weaving tension strained between them, wrapping around the moment thicker than winter coats. Jamie's confrontational manner ignited disdain in Barron. They spoke feelings that others were uncomfortable expressing, yet they stemmed from unfounded assumptions. It was a clash that signaled something beyond mere rudeness. "That's rich coming from you," Jamie said, a pinch of defiance laced with exasperation in their tone. "You have no idea what it's like to walk in my shoes." In that instant, Jamie felt the charge of interaction magnify, igniting a simmer that would soon bubble to the surface. Barron exhaled deeply, feeling the air grow heavy. An uncomfortable silence fell like a shroud. Each stood firmly entrenched in their assumptions. Jamie voicing a cloud of frustration against views they presumed were linked to Barron, and Barron, unable to shake the crushing weight of expectations that barely grazed the surface of who he was. Amidst the hum of cheerful conversations and empathetic laughter, an undercurrent of disquiet had begun to brew, a subtle tension that sent whispers through the air. Little did they understand that soon they would both be thrust into a crucible, where prejudices would crack, and the malleable truth of raw humanity would shimmer just underneath the surface, waiting to burst forth. As Jamie wiped down the counter, fervently caught in their own tumult, a mixture of repulsion and misunderstanding, mingling perilously, they barely noticed the first shift in that hazy atmosphere. Barron stood on the precipice of walls too high to scale, yet propelled by a desire for authenticity. Wrapped in a cloak of misjudgments, their fates were finally intertwined in ways neither had anticipated. The evening ahead would lay down the foundation for transformation, where the burden of perception would begin to unravel and redefine the essence of rebirth. The vibrant city of Elysium was awakening with the bustle of life as the morning sun draped the streets in golden hues. Brick storefronts and cafe terraces lined the avenues like painted canvases, each whispering a story of the individuals who frequented them. Jamie stood at the entrance of the Common Ground Collective, a trendy local store nestled shoulder to shoulder with an artisan coffee shop. This shop didn't just sell liberal merchandise, it served as a communal hub where progressive ideals danced in the air like confetti, brightening the often gray backdrop of modern life. Inside the store was a kaleidoscope of colors, with t-shirts emblazoned with powerful slogans, shelves overflowing with activist literature, and a corner dedicated to handmade crafts from local artisans. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting playful shadows as Jamie moved among them, arranging items with meticulous care. The scent of fresh brewed coffee wafted in from next door, mixing harmoniously with the notes of sandalwood and fresh paint that filled the shop. This was more than just a boutique, it was a space for dialogue, for nurturing the seeds of change. As Jamie prepared for the community event that afternoon, their excitement was palpable. "Today is going to be incredible," they exclaimed, bouncing on the balls of their feet while they gathered pamphlets from a nearby table. Their lips curled into a confident smile, their unwavering belief in the power of activism spilling over like the effervescent spritz of soda. Jamie had spent the week putting together this event, inviting local speakers and encouraging everyone to participate in discussions on pressing social issues. They were determined to inspire hope and ignite passion among the city's residents. All of it was a reflection of their own values. After all, they had always viewed community engagement as the bedrock of political evolution. As the sun descended, casting long shadows across the street, Jamie's enthusiasm grew as they busily prepped for the anticipated crowd. They decorated the window displays with protest signs highlighting today's theme of inclusivity and social justice. Colleagues buzzed around them, and laughter seeped through the gaps of lively conversation. "This is our time to make a difference, to show everyone that change starts here," Jamie declared to an audience of two other employees, who nodded appreciatively as they adjusted a large poster of the day's keynote speaker, a local activist known for her fiery speeches. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, heightened by the unique mix of people arriving for the event. Just then, the bell above the door jingled, catching Jamie's attention. To their surprise, in walked Barron Trump, his presence a stark contrast to the jubilant environment. He was dressed casually but impeccably, with a tailored shirt and dark jeans, white sneakers adorning his feet like a secret escape from expectations. The murmur of conversation halted briefly as eyes turned toward him, a hush that felt as heavy as the tension tightening in Jamie's chest. Barron was not what Jamie had assumed he would be. He didn't flounce in with the arrogance that often accompanied his family name. Instead, he stepped forward cautiously, scanning the store with genuine curiosity, as if testing the waters of unfamiliar territory. Jamie's stomach tightened, a clandestine alarm ringing in their mind. Standing at the heart of the bustling store, they felt a wave of impulse wash over them, laced with the recent memories of their harsh judgments about Barron's lineage, a product of the world's larger narrative. As he approached the counter, Jamie steeled themselves. "You're not suggesting you actually want to participate in this, are you?" They blurted out before they could rein their tongue in. The words tumbled out, betrayal in their rawness, a reflection of the vitriol they believed he might stand for. "This isn't exactly a family reunion," Jamie added, a sharpness edging into their tone, with laughter fluttering around them, tension framing the atmosphere. Barron's eyes narrowed slightly, blinking slowly as if he was assessing a challenge. "I came to see what it was all about," he replied, his voice steady and calm, even in the face of Jamie's social ambush. "I didn't realize it might be an unwelcome intrusion." Awkward silence enveloped them, the tension twisting tighter, spiraling from the crowd's reaction. Jamie felt their heartbeat quicken, heat creeping to their cheeks, as they read the disapproval simmering in the gaze of their fellow employees. The unease was palpable, a shared awareness that what had just transpired was a clash of belief systems playing out in real time. Jamie's sharpened remark highlighted an undeniable truth. Their contempt was now laid bare, forcing confrontation with their own biases. "Sorry, I just meant—" Jamie stumbled through the fragments of an apology that felt hollow amid the fervor of their emotions. None of it was landing correctly, as Barron folded his arms, an unconscious gesture of self-protection that only deepened the gap between them. "You meant to belittle me," he countered softly, yet firmly, his expression shifting into one of muted disappointment rather than anger. "It's okay. I get that a lot." A murmur of sympathy stirred in the corners, rivaled by the quiet judgments that had been whispered in hushed tones among the patrons before. Jamie felt exposed, as if they had ripped off a scab to reveal an ugly wound, and yet all they had to offer was insecurity. Yet the shutters closed over Barron's features. They weren't just opponents. They were mirrors reflecting each other's doubts and prejudices. Jamie watched as Barron turned slightly, preparing to retreat back into the warm embrace of anonymity. But something caught in their throat. This was more than just a political disagreement. This was a real person standing before them, a young man grappling with the monstrosity of his surname, longing for authenticity in a world of masks. That realization tugged at Jamie's heartstrings, yet they remained anchored by a fear steeped in their past convictions. The atmosphere in the Common Ground Collective shifted from jovial to somber, an unspoken understanding settling amongst the crowd, a silent acknowledgement of how easily misunderstandings flared from a single moment, how easy it was to assume the worst of one another. Jamie stood there, dissecting the remnants of their abrasive words as Barron retreated into the collective. a space meant to spark change instead lit by the slow burn of disdain. As the event commenced, the warmth of the conversation began weaving through the room again, but Jamie found themselves somewhat detached, lost in thought about what they had just set in motion. The confrontation with Barron hung over them like a dark cloud, provoking contemplation about the dividing lines they had drawn. They watched him from afar, mingling with the attendees who were drawn to his quiet ease, recognizing the irony of how criticism had turned into isolation for the both of them. This moment marked a shift, a subtle, undeniable trigger in the grand scheme of their personal growth, one that would reverberate far beyond the confines of the store's colorful walls. The chatter around them began to fade into the background as Jamie faced the reality of their actions. They could no longer dismiss Barron as merely a representation of political ideology. He was now an enigma, looming larger in Jamie's internal dialogue, a prompt for questions about understanding that lingered just out of reach. And thus, amidst the cascade of voices, laid a simmering conflict that neither Jamie nor Barron had foreseen, illustrating the first step in Jamie's chaotic rebirth. A shattering of preconceived notions ushering in the chance for transformation through personal connection. It was a dreary Wednesday afternoon, and the softly humming fluorescent lights flickered above Jamie as they arranged merchandise on the shelves. The store was buzzing with the pre-event excitement of an upcoming community gathering intended to promote liberal values and social justice. Bright banners adorned the walls, calling for inclusivity and equality, lauding the very principles Jamie had fought to support for years. They moved from one display to another, their mind abuzz with ideas for speeches, workshops, and conversations. Jamie's heart raced with anticipation, a swell of hope shimmering just beneath the surface. Then a shadow crossed the entrance, pulling Jamie from their thoughts. Barron Trump stood there, an imposing figure framed against the vibrant entrance. Jamie felt an immediate tension knot in their stomach. Images flashed through their mind. Media representations of Barron, headlines that equated his existence with his family's controversial politics. A deep frown etched itself across Jamie's face, and they instinctively braced for the confrontation that seemed inevitable. In a split second, every fiber in Jamie's being recoiled as old biases flared to life. They remembered the way Barron had skulked away after Jamie's unprovoked jab during the last event, a misunderstanding that Jamie had initially misinterpreted as merely a harmless critique. Yet now, in facing Barron directly, those judgmental perceptions transformed into an urgent internal conflict. Jamie's anger morphed into a surprising pang of guilt, one that they had buried beneath vocal condemnation. It simmered hot and heavy between them as they noticed Barron's hesitant steps toward the back of the store, trying to avoid the very atmosphere that Jamie had cultivated with so much passion. Hey, are you here to buy something?" Jamie asked, their voice sharper than intended. Dread curled in the pit of their stomach, yet they pushed forward, unwilling to back down. Perhaps they were hoping for Barron to drown in their disdain, for the discomfort of coherent thoughts to tumble over one another. "I have a pamphlet about our community discussions later." Barron glanced up, the hurt evident in his eyes for a brief moment before he masked it with indifference. "I actually came to look for books on social justice," he replied, a gentle tremor in his voice that barely masked the disinterest morphing into anger. "But I don't think this place is very welcoming to me, so—" Jamie interrupted, their heart racing. "You think you'll find social justice literature among these?" They gestured dismissively at the liberal literature sprawled on the display tables. "You wouldn't understand the first thing about the struggles we face in this society, not with your reputation." There was silence. Barron stiffened, that familiar deflection of family baggage creeping into the air. "It's not my fault that my family is famous for their politics," he began, his voice thick with bitterness. But Jamie wasn't finished. "Oh, save it!" Jamie snapped, a surge of adrenaline fueling their words. "You can't pretend to be different. Have you ever stood up against your family? Do you even care about the impact your name has on people?" The moment was electric, filled with the raw tension of clashing egos. Jamie's words hung in the air heavily, carrying the weight of their assumptions, built on nothing but the shallow impressions of a boy whose major crime was a last name. Barron's expression tightened, biting down on flesh and fury. He took a small step back, as if recoiling from the very idea that it was his personal responsibility to bear the burdens of distance from his upbringing. Jamie crossed their arms defiantly, waiting for a retort, feeling the numbing pride of ideological opposition fuel their fire. Yet Barron merely glanced away, his shoulders slumping under an unseen weight, sending a shiver of frustration coursing through Jamie's veins. For days, the strain from their encounter lingered between them, leaving an unbearable tension that felt almost palpable in the confines of the store. Jamie's mind raced each morning as they prepared and set about their daily tasks, thoughts festering and becoming sharper by the moment. Barron appeared in the store often, seeking refuge among the bookshelves, avoiding eye contact but acutely aware of Jamie's presence. Emotion twisted in Jamie's gut as the constant interaction reminded them so cruelly of their outburst. In hushed tones, Jamie overheard conversations among other staff members about Barron's family, and the implications behind every vitriolic remark sunk in deep. They were laden with judgment, harsh words rebounding in Jamie's mind like a tennis ball hit with equal force. "He's just like them," someone said contemptuously, "caught up in a lifestyle he'll never escape." The fact that the group perceived Barron solely through the lens of his surname made Jamie uneasy, swirling with doubt about their own judgments. "Maybe he just wants to fit in," Jamie contemplated quietly, the guilt festering underneath their bravado. But the solidarity among the liberal staff felt both comforting and constraining. Jamie's convictions were carved in stone, and yet those cherished ideals began to feel like shackles. They struggled to reconcile the parts of themselves that longed for connection with the impulse to uphold their beliefs, locking them in an escalating spiral of confusion. "Hey, are you ready for tonight?" a coworker asked, snapping Jamie from their brooding thoughts. Emily's voice was cheerful, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside Jamie. The community event was almost upon them, an occasion that, for Jamie, had begun to symbolize a battleground between the two conflicting ideals they couldn't escape. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jamie replied, masking their unease with a haphazard smile. They stood amid flurries of decorations, yet the bright colors could not match the heaviness in their heart. This was their event, their time to shine, but it was inevitably tinged with Barron's presence lurking in the corners. As the space filled with participants from all walks of life, liberals, the open-minded, even those who leaned more conservatively, an uneasy truce settled over the gathering. Conversations flew fast and free at first, mingling laughter harmonizing in the air. Yet deeper discussions began to occur, and tensions snapped like a tight string on a guitar. The audience soon shifted against the backdrop of challenge and debate. Jamie stood at the forefront, championing liberalism with eager fervor, sharing stories of their encounters and how they've shaped their understanding of injustice. Voices rose and fell like the wind, but the digging accusations soon began to permeate the air, washing away the initial joviality. "Well, if you're so concerned about social injustice," a participant interjected with a sneer, "then what about the wealthy leaders leaning left? Aren't they just as guilty of ruining lives?" Simple-minded nobodies, Jamie thought, feeling trapped inside their own echo chamber, repeating their own dogmas. But desperation surged within as Barron stepped forward, his heart practically visible in his eyes, which glimmered with vulnerability. "But not all wealth is evil. Some want to help," he ventured, maintaining a respectful tone that belied the anger cloaked in his every word. "Really? Are you seriously trying to defend the obscenely rich?" Another voice cut through with disdain, drawing groans from others. Jamie's heart raced at this provocation, wanting desperately to stand behind the ideals they once admired. Just because someone comes from a family of influence doesn't mean they embody everything you accuse them of, Barron continued, unwavering as the fire ignited between him and Jamie. The two stood bearing the brunt of accusations from two sides. Jamie's progressive fervor in stark contrast to Barron's reluctant defense. Barron met Jamie's gaze with a depth of emotion that momentarily stripped away the defensive wall that had grown tall between them. "Why not give me a chance to show you who I am?" His voice nearly trembled with frustration, but it was firm. Jamie felt the weight of the collective response. Every pair of eyes watched on with scrutiny. Is that what you think this is about? They retorted, breathless, emotions roiling inside. You think I can just cast aside everything I believe because you want to play the martyr? Believe me, I'm not playing. Barron's voice was sharp, each word filled with conviction. Don't you want to see beyond family names? Isn't the point of all this to connect with people trying to understand the world? At that moment, all the defensiveness burst forth, shattering the fragile mask that Jamie had maintained around their beliefs. Why? Because you need validation? Because your dinner parties with the elite are more important than real change? Their breath hitched, furious energy erupting, aching to lash out and reclaim their identity. This wasn't merely a debate. It felt personal now, the flames igniting the very core of Jamie's being. Stop twisting my words, Barron snapped back, his eyes sparking with a rare heat that bewildered Jamie. Every instinct told Jamie to withdraw, yet they felt locked in a perilous dance, a clash of ideals, brute emotions pouring forth like a violent storm appealing for release. Your perspective is too narrow. You see my name, and suddenly I'm a villain in your narrative. And you don't consider how it feels to be judged without action, without a conversation? Jamie found their voice trembling with vulnerability, their bravado cracking in a moment of clarity. I'm allowed to feel betrayed by you, by this fucking legacy. The crowd hushed, tension hanging thick in the air. Even while storm clouds gathered overhead, Jamie and Barron locked eyes, the world fading into nothingness around them. Digesting vulnerable truths pulsed between them. Shame, anger, confusion, light weaving through the crackled darkness, illuminating everything they failed to recognize about one another. Moments ticked by like clock gears shifting, yet the need for understanding began to bloom amidst the chaos. Both sides braced for the aftermath of ideas colliding, seizing the truth within crumbling barriers. In this emotional crucible, where assumptions shattered and identities mixed, Jamie felt a glimmer of possibility. The first step toward understanding, buried beneath the weight of judgment. In passion and spirit, they sought not simply to dismantle one another, but to discover the humanity hidden behind the facade. The weight of burdens they both bore. With trembling hands, Jamie inhaled deeply, cocktails of emotions swirling madly within them. Empathy, anger, and longing churned, framing the path forward in a direction they had only dared to glimpse. Suddenly, the perspective shifted, burning amidst flames of conflict, planting seeds for the profound transformation ahead. The community event Phil dubbed Voices for Change was supposed to be a celebration of diversity and freedom of speech. But as the crowd gathered, so did an undercurrent of tension. Jamie stood at the front, hands on hips, surveying the diverse crowd with determination painted across their face. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Banners for social justice hung from the rafters, and colorful pamphlets strewn across tables offered a multitude of progressive ideas. But just beneath that vibrant surface lay the thorny friction stemming from the last encounter with Barron Trump. Let's make this a safe space for everyone, Jamie announced, addressing the assembly. They felt tension coil within the air, tightening like a band ready to snap. Among friends and strangers alike, there was a mix of enthusiasm and apprehension. Jamie caught sight of Barron entering the store, hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, his expression unreadable. As he joined the fray, Jamie felt their pulse quicken. Another meeting of the minds, or perhaps another collision of convictions. Let's begin, Jamie called out, forcing a bright smile. They kicked off the discussion with a focus on racial equality and a more equitable economy, fiery passion evident in every word. The fact that Barron sat across the room, watching and listening, was yet another reminder of the specter of their last encounter. For a brief moment, Jamie thought they could somehow reconcile the two worlds they found themselves living in, that of their progressive ideals and the complexities of the human experience that Barron represented. As Jamie animatedly spoke about a recent proposal to allocate more funding to underserved communities, they couldn't help but glance at Barron. He seemed absorbed, yet an inscrutable look crossed his face, highlighting the conflict brewing within him. Suddenly, a voice chimed in from the crowd, igniting heat in the chilly air of the store. Excuse me, Jamie. How can you propose this when people like you just slam doors in the faces of those who might disagree? Barron here could share some insights about how the other half lives. The room went silent as eyes shifted to Barron, entrapping him in a spotlight he never sought. Jamie's heart sank. They recognized the individual who spoke, a local activist they admired until now. "What do you know about him?" Jamie shot back, frustration shaping their words. "He's just a product of privilege, a reflection of everything that's wrong." Barron stood, visibly tense but calm. "I'm not here to argue about my family name, Jamie. It doesn't define who I am. I'm actually interested in having a dialogue, not one fueled by animosity or judgment, but real discussion. People often overlook how complicated it can be for someone in my position." "Complicated?" Jamie snorted. "Is that what we're calling it now? Privileged kid feels misunderstood for not being like his family? It must be so hard for you to navigate your yacht." Laughter erupted from the crowd, but it felt mocking rather than joyful. Jamie felt emboldened by the moment, but quickly realized that Barron was visibly hurt. There was no denying it. Their words had cut deeper than intended. Suddenly, the gravity of the moment descended, smothering Jamie's bravado. "Is that how you view me?" Barron's voice dropped, rich with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Just a caricature? You make me feel pathetic, Jamie. You refuse to see me as I am, just a person trying to figure things out too." "Then what would you have me think, Barron?" Jamie shot back sharply, trying to mask the regret starting to bubble inside them. "What do you want me to say? Oh, poor Barron, who has to live with the stigma of wealth? You have no idea what it's like to struggle or fight for social justice?" "I know what it's like to be pressured," Barron replied, "to live in a glass house where everyone expects you to be a reflection of your family, and all I crave is the chance to connect with people, to understand them beyond labels." With each passing moment, Jamie perceived a tidal wave of confusion rise within them as Barron's words collided with their own beliefs. But before they could articulate how jammed they felt between the fights of ideals and personal connection, the crowd began to murmur and shift. Sensing the divide grow sharper, Jamie's voice grew frantic. "So you think we should just, what? Accept how things are? Make peace with an unjust system that has crippled so many lives? How can you just sit there and take it as someone on the other side of the divide?" Jamie gestured toward Barron, eyes wide with disbelief. An activist standing nearby chimed in. "What we need here is a strong stance against the status quo. We can't afford to understand and sidestep." Jamie's expression grew steely. "It's naive to think that shouting louder will fix anything." "I'm with Jamie," Barron interjected, voice steady now, almost pleading. "Beliefs don't shift overnight, but come from open dialogue. You can't change minds with force. You need to listen." More people gathered closer, sensing the brewing confrontation. Jamie felt trapped in their voice of reason, sputtering into unrecognizable tones. They looked into Barron's earnest face, recognizing a flicker of understanding challenged by uncertainty. The way Jamie felt, caught in ideological tides they had always considered unmovable. "Maybe you're right about what you said, but where do we even start?" Jamie creaked, almost defeated. "You love the system that keeps people down, Barron. Selling out isn't the solution. I'm not about to sacrifice my beliefs because you're here." Barron stood firmly, resolve blooming in the depth of his gaze. "You don't even know what I believe. Your anger is immobilizing you rather than leading you toward real answers. We're not so different, Jamie. Don't let your indignation blind your perspective." The intensity thickened. Jamie felt their heart pounding between the two opposing forces. It wasn't just a discussion. It had morphed into an emotional confrontation. What once felt highly abstract was now personal. Jamie felt a tightness in their throat as they pondered their next move. What if there was a seed of truth in Barron's words? Would they let go of their unyielding stance long enough to forge a connection? But that tiny inkling felt like a betrayal of the person they had always championed, standing firm against a world that had always seemed divided. "Maybe so," Jamie hesitantly replied. "But what am I supposed to do? Swallow lies for the sake of being polite?" Suddenly the air grew palpable as the silence enveloped everyone. Tension writhed as if testing boundaries beyond comprehension. creating an invisible divide. Jamie felt a ball of anxiety settle in their stomach, spiraling downward as the room echoed the unspoken conflict. "Maybe you need to realize that what you believe isn't necessarily universal," replied Barron, trying to pull Jamie back toward an understanding. "It's valid for you, but that doesn't mean it's the only truth. There is room for nuance, Jamie." "Nuance!" Jamie repeated the word as if tasting it. Clarity washed over Jamie for a fleeting moment, the fog of certainty starting to lift. Could it be that Barron was actually right? But how do we bring that nuance into much-needed action? Barron stepped closer, sincerity woven into his every phrase. "I'm not suggesting abandoning your beliefs, but perhaps understanding also involves acknowledging the humanity in those you disagree with. If we can't see each other, how can we build anything meaningful?" In that instant, as Jamie faced Barron, they felt their defenses crumbling. The barbs of their earlier insults felt almost trivial as a weight lifted. Vulnerability surged within, battling against the instinct to shut it all down. Jamie tried to speak, but words eluded them, even as doubt twisted uncomfortably within. "Barron," they nearly whispered, "what if I want to see you, to find that common ground, but I just don't know how?" "Let's start by talking," Barron replied with the slightest flicker of hope illuminating his features. Just then, as the tension reached its peak, an unexpected figure entered the scene. Max, an outspoken critic and known antagonist of everything Jamie represented, barged into the shop. "What's with all the warm and fuzzy feelings?" he scoffed, the break in the fragile atmosphere sending shockwaves through the crowd. "You don't really think this kid could help you, do you? He's just a spoiled brat, nothing more." Heartbeats quickened, and a collective intake of breath swept through the group. The moment felt perilous, dangling over an abyss of conflict and confusion. "I'm still here," Barron countered, fueled by the need to dismantle the absurdity encapsulated by Max. "We're not here to pander to the lowest denominators. I want to have a real conversation. Jamie wants to talk. Or does that rattle your cage?" Max rolled his eyes, clearly contemptuous. "Talk? It's people like you who've made a mockery of everything real change stands for. You wouldn't know true hardship if it smacked you in the face." As the crowd began to murmur again, Jamie's heart dropped. This wasn't merely a conflict of ideas now. It had morphed into a battle for identity. Jamie's vision blurred along with the lines separating them from Barron. The deeper questions arose, swallowing Jamie in doubt and dread. Had they made a grievous mistake by judging Barron too quickly? Were they now locked in a fight against the very ideals they had once championed as unassailable? "Max," Jamie began, heart racing, feeling torn and fragile. "You don't understand what it means to communicate in the midst of this cauldron of ideas." But before Jamie could finish, Barron interjected. "Just like the world isn't painted in black and white, the solutions to these issues aren't meant to be polarized. We have to strive for understanding." The room shifted, the onlookers transfixed by the confrontation. Each exchanged glance only thickened the air, drawing lines of separation in a community meant for open discourse and inclusivity. With renewed focus, Jamie turned back to Barron, wrestling with the internal storm of emotions threatening to overcome them. "I want to explore this, Barron. I really do. But how? I feel lost trying to fit everything together." As the anger simmered and emotions flared, the space felt electric, a vibrant nexus of uncertainty and possibility. Would these fragile connections endure the pressure? Could they adapt while still holding on to their beliefs? Or was the engagement with Barron merely an exercise in futility in the face of unyielding prejudice? The crowd surged with whispers again, dark eyes piercing through Jamie and Barron like daggers. Would Jamie allow their heart to soften and acknowledge that connecting could be the key to transformation? That the difference just might be the turning point they were both seeking? Or would they remain steadfast, struggling to bend their views against the world's unrelenting pressure? As all eyes fixated on them, the tension reached a tipping point, leaving both Barron and Jamie standing on the precipice of understanding and division. One final moment of realization left unspoken as they awaited the next inevitable clash, the next turn of the storm. The vibrant hues of the community event faded into a blur as the argument echoed in Jamie's mind. Colors seemed to dim as they stormed away from Barron, hands trembling not from rage but a deep-rooted confusion. The once animated store now felt like a warped reflection of all they had been fighting for. Facing the crowd, Jamie's gaze locked onto Barron, who stood steady, a solitary figure in a tempest of emotions. Yanking instinctively at their oversized sweater, Jamie paced along the shop floor, feeling every gaze on their back, every whisper fluttering like angry moths. "Why did I say all of that?" Jamie muttered to themselves, voice barely breaking through the tightness in their throat. Barron was just a boy who deserved civility, and Jamie had turned him into a target, a symbol of all the things they thought they opposed. The people around them, once so supportive, now felt suffocating in their judgment. It doesn't matter if I just blew it, Jamie thought, feeling the ache of every word they had flung, each laden with resentment for the family ties Barron bore. Yet the quieter voice inside persisted. No, it does matter. You need to find out who he really is. Jamie, you all right? Karen, a fellow employee with empathetic eyes, approached cautiously, concern etched into her brow. Just processing, Jamie replied, avoiding her gaze, their heart thunderously beating the rhythm of shame. Can I be honest for a second? Of course, Karen encouraged, her patience palpable. I assumed he was just some entitled punk, a product of privilege, but I don't really know him at all. I was just too quick to judge, Jamie confessed, feelings tumbling out like hastily spilled paint. Well, it's understandable, Karen replied gently. That name carries so much weight. It's hard not to let our biases take over. Sighing, Jamie pinched the bridge of their nose, feeling queasy. But I can't just erase it, can I? They were wrestling with a storm, their internal conflict boiling into a fever pitch. The juxtaposition of fervent ideals versus harsh reality rattled them core deep. Maybe it's about confronting it, Karen suggested, sparks of wisdom lighting her eyes. It's not too late. Maybe you could talk to Barron. Set things right? That idea unfurled fragmented hope inside Jamie. You're right, they whispered, the spark igniting into a blaze. If I'm truly committed to growth, I have to be brave and face this. With newfound resolve, Jamie approached the embers of the gathering, where Barron hovered on the outskirts, his expression still masked by the cool stoicism that felt almost palpable. The crowd was buzzing with conversations peppered with opinions, but Jamie forged ahead, cutting through the noise, heart crashing against the walls of apprehension. Barron, Jamie called, hoping to capture his attention without crowding him. He turned slowly, clearly startled by Jamie's approach, his blue eyes flashing between recognition and wariness. Jamie, he replied, his voice low. The distance between them seemed insurmountable, the air thick with the remnants of their previous clash. I need to talk to you. The quavering edge of Jamie's voice felt like a plea for understanding, another chance for reconciliation. What is there to say? You made your stance quite clear. Barron's retort was sharp, each word a reminder of their earlier fight. Yet beneath the steeliness lay an exhaustion that mirrored Jamie's own. I know. Believe me, I know, Jamie said, cautiously stepping closer, feeling the risks coursing through their veins. But I was wrong. I let my anger blind me. I've been caught up in these ideas, and I mistook you for a reflection of them. Barron's face softened slightly, curiosity now flickering in his eyes. Why did you come over then? I realized I don't want to carry this animosity, Jamie revealed, their heart beating like a drum in a frantic procession. I want to understand who you are beyond the name and the stereotypes. He regarded Jamie, the tension hanging in the air like fog. It's easy to see me as just a name, he replied quietly. You're not wrong there. I know how it feels. I mean, you don't even know my story. Everyone thinks they have me figured out, but they haven't bothered to ask. Please, Jamie urged, lowering their tone to invite honesty. I want to learn. I've let my biases shape my view of you, and I hate that I did that. I want to at least hear your perspective. Barron's expression shifted, surprise loosening the tension in his shoulders. There was a flash of vulnerability in him, the facade beneath which he had been hiding, shimmering faintly. All right, he started cautiously, but just understand, I'm still figuring things out myself. I can relate, Jamie nodded, grateful for the sliver of trust being extended. They both took a deep breath, reality blurring with possibilities. What do you want to know? Barron prompted. What's it like for you, growing up in your family with those expectations? Jamie ventured, seeking insight behind the closed doors guarding Barron's true self. I often feel like I'm living in a shadow, he admitted, eyes wavering away momentarily. People constantly look at me and see everything that surrounds my name. The privilege, the media, the politics. But when I step back, it's exhausting. I mean, I know I should want to uphold a certain image, but who I actually am. It gets lost somewhere amidst the expectations. Jamie felt the tug of empathy pull on their heartstrings. So you're trapped? Sometimes I just want to scream, to break out of that box everyone put me in. I like art and music and hanging out with normal people. It's like no one lets me be just that, Barron said, his voice almost pleading for understanding. I should have thought about that before jumping to conclusions, Jamie responded softly. I've been so caught up in what others think, too. I'm not innocent in this. It's hard to let my perspectives be challenged. Their conversation began to shift the air around them. Shadows of judgment faded, replaced by the tentative emergence of understanding. Jamie realized that their conversation had become a shared bonding moment, each revelation bridging the gap that hatred had carved. Thank you for talking. It means a lot, Barron murmured, the weight in his shoulders visibly lightening. Most people would rather keep fighting than listen. I guess that mirrors our world, doesn't it? Jamie mused, eyes narrowing and lips lifting slightly. But we have the chance to shift that. With a nod from Barron, it was almost as if the icy barrier had begun to thaw. Jamie could see the flicker of hope in his expression, an unspoken agreement growing in the newfound camaraderie. Let's keep talking then, Barron suggested, a tentative smile appearing, lifting the heaviness. Maybe even collaborate on something to bring unity back to our community. I mean, if people can find common ground, we might show there's a way beyond our divisions. Jamie beamed back, astonished at how light they both felt. I'd love that. We could set up an event, a forum maybe, where people can actually communicate instead of just shouting over each other. Yeah, Barron's enthusiasm lit up the atmosphere, their shared laughter bubbling up like a rejuvenating force. Jamie's heart raced, not with dread, but with a shared sense of purpose, a rekindled belief that conversation could bridge even the widest of divides. As hours passed, the crowd around them dissolved into the background, and for the first time, Jamie began to perceive Barron not just through the lenses of political bias, but as a potential friend, a collaborator. Change was brewing, an acceptance of what was once deemed unthinkable. They were, after all, human, a connection sparked between two grateful souls, unearthing their mutual existence. As the event came to a close, Jamie looked into Barron's eyes, a determination clearly intertwining with compassion. Barron, after all this, I want to be brave. I was unfair, and you deserve better. You've shown me the courage it takes to confront my own biases, Jamie, Barron replied, stated, appreciation gleaming in his smile. This is just the beginning. And in that moment of dialogue, the tension that had weighed heavy on both of their hearts cracked open, ushering in a wave of warmth and acceptance. They no longer wore the chains of preconceived notions, now stepping towards a path of collaboration and understanding. Standing together, Jamie and Barron took a meaningful breath, both feeling the transformative power of their encounter knit them together, unveiling a world of possibilities where unity could thrive in a tapestry woven from the threads of differing perspectives. In the heart of that bustling store, light broke through the lingering fog of prejudice. This profound connection nudged the world toward a deeper understanding, silently reshaping their futures. The turning point had arrived, redefining not only their paths, but also resonating in the hearts of all those who would follow their journey. Each narrative penned from this point forth would reflect the rebirth haunting their conversations, a promise of collaboration, courage, and unbroken connections. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the busy streets, Jamie stood outside the local store. It had been weeks since the tumultuous encounter with Barron Trump, and the events of that day had begun to settle within them, like loose leaves swept into a corner. The city buzzed with life, an endless array of conversations and faces passing by. Yet Jamie found a deeper quietude within themselves. The transformation they had undergone was both challenging and enlightening, forcing them to confront their perceptions and engage with the world around them on a level they had never anticipated. In the following weeks after their heartfelt dialogue, Jamie had committed themselves to integrating the lessons learned from their exchanges with Barron. They reflected on their previous staunch liberal views, deeply examining where empathy fit within those ideals. Inspired by thoughts of Barron's struggles and his wish to be seen as more than just a family name, Jamie learned that respecting opposing viewpoints could broaden their outlook without diluting their values. It was not about relinquishing beliefs, but rather constructing a bridge toward a deeper understanding of humanity. One afternoon, while sorting through a pile of community outreach flyers adorned with bright colors and hopeful slogans, Jamie felt a presence beside them. Turning, they found Barron leaning against the display, the soft evening light revealing his naturally earnest expression. The initial discomfort from their past encounters had noticeably faded, replaced by a tentative camaraderie that felt ripe for exploration. "Hey," Barron greeted with a subtle smile, brushing back a stray lock of hair. "I saw you were organizing the fundraiser for the homeless shelter. I was thinking, I'd love to help." Jamie felt a mix of surprise and warmth at Barron's offer. "Really? I mean, that would be great. I could use a friendly set of hands. Although I didn't expect you'd be interested in getting involved after, well, everything." Barron shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in his gaze. "I realized I need to make efforts too, to show I'm not just someone's son, but someone who believes in making a difference, even if I approach it differently than others." Jamie nodded, the sincerity in Barron's voice washing over them like a refreshing breeze. "It's easy to forget we're all trying to navigate our own journeys. I've learned that the hard way." Barron grinned, his guard lowering as they began to brainstorm ideas, blending their visions for the fundraiser. The idea morphed into a collaborative endeavor that showcased their shared passion for community. They decided to channel their energies into an event focused on empathy and understanding, titled Connecting Threads, where individuals from diverse backgrounds could share their stories and experiences. The preparations brought them closer, sparking deep conversations during late evenings, spent arranging chairs or curating a lineup of speakers. Each anecdote exchanged between them became another thread binding their perspectives together. They revealed their personal struggles, Jamie contemplating the limitations they had placed on their own worldview, and Barron speaking candidly about the relentless expectations he faced. Through these exchanges, they both experienced a cathartic transformation, unearthing preconceived notions layered upon years of bias and misunderstanding. Finally, the day of the event arrived, and the store brimmed with energy. Attendees filtered in, representing a beautiful collage of backgrounds, opinions, and aspirations. Jamie and Barron worked seamlessly, greeting guests at the door and assisting speakers as they navigated through the crowd. What surprised Jamie was the curiosity and openness that filled the room. The laughter, shared stories, and the act of simply listening to one another fostered an electric atmosphere that transcended political affiliations. As the event continued, Jamie stepped back to observe. They found Barron animatedly engaging with a local activist, their laughter echoing amidst conversations. In that moment, Jamie realized how far they had come, not just their relationship with Barron, but within themselves. The rebirth they had experienced was profound, illustrating the importance of empathy, reconciliation, and personal growth. Ultimately, their initial disdain had evolved into a powerful partnership bridging political divides. When the event concluded, the two stood outside as night enveloped the city. Jamie took a deep breath, lifting their gaze toward the starlit sky. "You know, I never thought I'd be standing here, having worked alongside you like this," they said, their voice laced with awe. Barron chuckled. "Neither did I, but it feels right. We're both evolving, and that's something worth celebrating." "True," Jamie replied, a smile spreading across their face. "I learned that change comes easier when you acknowledge your biases and actively seek to understand others. I was too quick to assume you were just a reflection of your family's politics. And I learned that it's okay to challenge those assumptions. Barron added thoughtfully, it's essential to reach out, not just to defend oneself, but to connect more deeply. Together, they stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of their shared growth. It was a moment of finality, yet also of newfound beginnings. The narrative of their lives had intertwined, rewriting the paths they were on. Their story became one of hope, a testament to the idea that transformation is possible through empathy, active dialogue, and a commitment to understanding. As they walked away from the store side by side, Jamie felt a renewed purpose. They had accepted the complexities of human experience, bridging the gap between their beliefs and those of Barron. In embracing this rebirth, Jamie understood the beauty of individuality and the power of connection, a lesson that would guide them forward into a future brimming with possibility.